Welcome into the LSU Sports Insider Podcast. Today is Thursday, September the 25th. I'm Zach Ewing with two of the Advocates' finest, Scott Rabelais and Wilson Alexander. They are headed up to Oxford tomorrow to cover LSU versus Ole Miss. I guess you're technically not going to be in Oxford until Saturday, but you're headed toward Oxford tomorrow.
Gonna make a pit stop in Jackson, eat at Walker's Drive-In, which is always a must. I lived in Jackson for 8 months out of college, covering high school sports and helping out with coverage of Ole Miss, Mississippi State for the Clarion Ledger. And so I'm a little bit familiar with the food scene, and I always take us to Walker's, which I think Rab appreciates.
It's a very good place. I was like, we're going to a drive-in? I remember the first time. No, it's really good. It really is.
And Oxford is a cool college town, but I also appreciate the idea of driving in on a big game day. You kind of get to see all of the revelry and tailgating and things like that. And so that'll be cool too. It's a 2:30 p.m. game Saturday. It's number 4 LSU at number 13 Ole Miss. Interesting thing here, and we'll talk predictions later in the show. Ole Miss is actually favored in this game by sportsbooks by 1.5 points, even as the lower ranked team. And in a lot of ways, Wilson, like we talked about the Clemson game and the Florida game being so crucially important for LSU, and they were. I mean, you can't lose those games. This is probably their toughest test to date if we look at what the teams have been so far.
Yeah, you wouldn't have thought that going into the season, but now Clemson and Florida are both 1-3, and they have struggling offenses that haven't really tested LSU in the way that you thought that they would. And this Ole Miss team is now, I mean, it has the most explosive offense that LSU will have seen to date. On the other hand, Ole Miss hasn't seen a defense like this, the one that's going to get from LSU this season. So we're going to find out a lot about these teams. It should be the best test that LSU has had to this point. I like that LSU has already gone on the road. It's not like that's going to be the first time. This isn't going to be the first time he's experiencing something like that. This team isn't. But it's still going to have to face some challenges that it hasn't had to yet this year.
Yeah, Rab, LSU has struggled in Oxford a couple of times recently, and Lane Kiffin's got it going up there. And I think Wilson's right. Like, having been to Clemson, just even though Clemson's not as good as we thought, to be in that environment helps. But I agree. It's like immovable object, unstoppable force. The Ole Miss offense against the LSU defense is really going to be must see TV or must see in person for y'all.
Yeah, it seems like a strength versus strength in that respect. It's not going to be 55-49 like it was 2 years ago. It's not going to be that. But it could be a game like last year's game in Tiger Stadium where LSU wins in overtime, I think 29-26. So it could definitely be a game like that. I think Ole Miss being favored by 1.5. LSU was earlier 1.5 point favorite. It's not surprising. If this game was in Tiger Stadium, LSU would be, a 4 or 5 point favorite?
No, usually only 1.5 to 2 points for home field. So it'd be flipped the other way.
Okay, it'd be flipped the other way. So look, we're going to talk about scheduling, SEC scheduling later. This is a game that the SEC preserved as an annual rivalry for LSU. I can't imagine that's ever going to go away. And a good thing, because this is as classic a rivalry as LSU and has. Ole Miss has the Egg Bowl, of course, against Mississippi State. But this is a great game. And the way these programs have been building in the last few years or maintaining, should be another great chapter in this rivalry. And I expect another close, compelling game on Saturday.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to dig into it. We're going to talk about injuries and the matchups on either side of the ball, and then we'll offer our keys to the game and predictions at the end of this podcast, which is brought to you by Jerry Lane Cadillac. Command the road in a Cadillac where luxury, power, and presence come together. Experience it today at Jerry Lane Cadillac. But before we get into all that, I do want to spend just a moment. We had a podcast on Monday. We were able to talk with Koki and Reed about LSU's not permanent, but annual SEC opponents being Texas A&M, Arkansas, and these Rebels. On Tuesday night, we get the full LSU schedule for the next 4 years. And I got to say, I mean, we all knew going to 9 games was going to make these schedules more difficult, Wilson, but like seeing it on paper and seeing the actual matchups, it's going to be, number one, a lot of fun to watch over the next 4 years. Number two, it's going to be very difficult for anybody to just rack up these long winning streaks and have these 11, 12 win seasons.
We've already had to start doing this because of the parity that has kind of come into the sport the past few years. And maybe another factor of that is the expansion in the SEC, even though they aren't playing more conference games just yet. The SEC, there isn't that one singular, unbeatable team like there was for so long. And so now you're having to reset your expectations. And we're seeing that maybe a lot in college football, but here let's just talk about the SEC. Yeah, you can't really go into a season anymore, I think, just expecting or even thinking that you're going to go 12-0. Like, you have to, I think, account for some losses here and there. And that's going to become more and more of a reality with 9 conference games. I mean, gosh, LSU's schedule next year is a lot of fun with home games against Alabama, Texas A&M, and Clemson. But then you got to go on the road to Ole Miss again, which we'll talk about why later, and Auburn. We'll see what they're like, in Tennessee. I mean, like, there's a lot of potential pitfalls on that schedule. It's a lot of fun, but you are going to be hard pressed for a team, I think any team, to go unbeaten.
Yeah, and Rab, I know this is right up your alley as far as sort of historic matchups, and we don't get LSU Florida or LSU Alabama every year instead. So there are some casualties to this system. But man, when you look at these schedules and you're going, we taken in combination with the fact that we may be going to a 16-team playoff, 8-4 is going to be a pretty damn good season. And 8-4, I think, will be in the conversation for the playoff in the SEC.
It could well be. Yeah, certainly 9-3. You know, right now you're thinking going into this season for LSU, got to win 10 games, and then you feel like you're in the playoff. Next year, especially if the playoff has expanded and going forward, 9-3, maybe 8-4. The committee is supposed to, the CFP committee is supposed to, you take into account team strength of schedule and not just look at the record, kind of like Indiana last year.
Come on. What?
Indiana had an easy schedule last year.
Yes. But now Indiana was rightfully making the playoff. Let's not get into last year.
Okay. All right.
Hoosiers catching strays here.
That's right. They certainly passed Illinois the other day, but so they're looking good right now. But it's going to be difficult. I think we're going to. I said college football is getting more like the NFL all the time, and this is another case. Is like an NFL team. You take a couple of losses, but obviously you're still in good shape, and you still can be a Super Bowl contender. This is going to be the case in college football. Yeah, I lost a couple of games in the SEC, but hey, my team's still really good. So. And still could win the national championship. So remember that 2-loss LSU team that won the national championship in 2007? You're going to be seeing a lot more of that, going forward.
We saw it last year with Ohio State.
Yeah, Ohio State. So maybe a 3-loss team. It wouldn't be shocking to see win the title. So it's a different way we have to look at it, because you don't have to go unbeaten and untied and unscored upon anymore like back in the 1930s.
Which I don't like, frankly. I think I don't want to swing so far in the other direction where we're talking about 8-4 teams competing for a national championship. If you go 8-4, that the playoff does not need to get so big that really is a team that's in consideration for competing for a national title.
I think, I tend to agree, because one of the things that made college football great in the past is even in the 4-team playoff era, if you had a clash of titans, it could be an elimination game. In September, in October, in November, it didn't matter when it happened. It could be an elimination game for one of those teams. Now that's no longer going to be the case. The trade-off and the positive is that we're going to get a lot more of those clashes. You're not going to see as many LSU versus Western Kentucky games. You're not going to see, you'll still see the FCS game, the scrimmage in there probably, and then maybe one other kind of weaker group of 5 team. But 10 weeks out of the year, you're going to be playing a big boy. And you're going to have to bring your A game, and there's not going to be any 2-week lulls where it's Southeastern followed by a bye week or something like that, and you just have to wait 3 weeks for the next big game. That won't happen in the future.
No, and look, we've talked about scheduling a lot over the years in the SEC, especially with the divisions. It's like, why is LSU playing this tough SEC West, and they got to play Florida every year when Florida was really good? Well, like I said, you're not playing Florida anymore, but it's very equitable. Everything's moving around. Everybody got kind of regional. The annual opponents are kind of regional in nature, especially true for LSU with Ole Miss, Arkansas, and Texas A&M, and everyone's going to have some tough games that they haven't played before. Like you said, everyone's going to play everybody every other year. Going to play home and home within 4 years. I think they did a very good job with it. I think there's always been a lot to criticize the SEC about with scheduling, but I think they did a very good job with this.
I would agree. I like that there is still kind of that regional element to things, which is what is a part of the fabric of college football and what for so long defined what it was. I like that that's included in there. I also think that they've done a pretty darn good job of balancing all of these schedules. It's really hard to do in a 16-team league to balance out the schedules. I feel like they got pretty close, and it's going to be hard to know what all these teams are like, 3-4 years down the road. But that's why they have these 4-year look-ins to kind of reassess every couple of years and maybe move some things around. But when you're playing so many of the teams within your own conference, you're probably going to have all of those things kind of even out over time, which I think is a good thing. And then you can get a better assessment of who is legitimately deserving of making the playoff.
Yeah, I agree. Well, one more quick thing you wanted to mention on the schedule was LSU is traveling to Ole Miss twice in a row. They are hosting Texas A&M twice in a row. Those were sort of, I think every team has that. If you look through the schedule, it's just necessary to kind of reset the rotation.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a good thing to point out because a lot of fans were confused about that. Why are you having to do that? That's why. It's part of the transition to this new format.
And for 4 years who they're going to play, and you're certainly looking ahead to next year. The Texas game is very interesting. They're coming to Tiger Stadium for the first time since 1953. They were supposed to come in 2020, did not because the SEC played an all SEC schedule because of COVID. And then, of course, you expect Arch Manning is going to have to return to Texas because he hasn't looked that great this year, and he's not ready for the NFL. And so we'll see what kind of reception he gets. Is it going to be a Nick Saban-like reception that he gets in Tiger Stadium? I imagine it might be.
Well, that's next year. Let's talk about this game.
Yeah, I think we should transition into this game. We're going to start with our injury report. That is brought to you by the Baton Rouge Clinic, your trusted healthcare provider in the heart of Baton Rouge. Whether you're in need of primary care, specialist services, or urgent care, the Baton Rouge Clinic has you covered with a team of dedicated and experienced professionals. Visit BatonRougeClinic.com to learn more or to schedule your appointment today. The Baton Rouge Clinic, caring for generations. And injury report, some good news for LSU. Certainly, Trey'Dez Green looks like he's coming back. West Weeks looks like he's coming back. The bad news, Caden Durham, not sure on that one.
I think Caden Durham's probably going to play. It seems as though it's trending in that direction as we get closer and closer to game day. He has an ankle sprain. Brian Kelly said Wednesday, and it did come out as this on the Wednesday night availability report that he would be questionable. But as LSU continues to go through the week, we'll see how that goes. And I think as of now, I feel as though he's going to probably play as long as the doctors, say that he can. I mean, remember, this is a guy who played most of last season with a steel plate in his foot after dislocating toes. Like, if he's allowed to play, like, he's probably going to try to get out there. And the one question is then going to be like, okay, how effective is he? How close to 100% is he? That we might not know until game day, or might not even know until kickoff. But, I feel like it's trending in that direction where you will probably see Caden Durham out there on Saturday.
And on the Ole Miss side, I don't know if Austin Simmons is still injured or not, but they are going to start Trinidad Chambliss at quarterback rep.
That is according to On3 and CBS Sports has reported that as well. That's the expectation. Austin Simmons was not on the availability report on Wednesday, which means you're going to play or is available to play. But Lane Kiffin said that Austin Simmons was the starter when he was 100% healthy. And so, okay, well, maybe he's 100% healthy, maybe he's not. But either way, it seems as though Ole Miss is going to go in the direction of Trinidad Chambliss. And that makes a lot of sense when he has played the way that he has over the past 2 weeks in particular.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about this when we break the game down, but his numbers are clearly better than Austin Simmons against tougher opponents. So interesting developments there from Ole Miss. But we're going to take a break. When we come back, we will break this game down from every possible angle. We will give you keys to the game, and we will finally make our predictions. Back after this.
You know how far I've gone, now I'm home again. I'm feeling more alive these days than I've ever been.
At the Baton Rouge Clinic, our sole focus is to provide exceptional health care for your entire family so that you can get back to doing what you love most. We are caring for generations.
You gave me love.
Did they ask you to do the commercial too?
Yeah, but they just gave me one line.
Bet like a Caesar. Like, we're gonna sit here and we're gonna tell them how Caesar's Sportsbook is just so easy to use that you can watch and bet thousands of sports events, even some NFL games.
They'll probably show us betting on our favourite players and teams at all the Vegas hotspots too.
Like, we have time for that montage.
I told him I couldn't do it.
They couldn't afford me.
I think the biggest thing that separates us is our people. We have a really amazing staff that really care about their customers, really care about our product. At Jerry Lane Cadillac, we value trust and transparency above all else. We have a little bit of something for everyone. So whether it be the 2025 Escalade, any of the smaller crossover vehicles, the XT4, 5, and 6, we've also got a wide variety of new EVs, including the 2025 electric Escalade IQ. I think the product lineup right now is the best that it's ever been in Cadillac.
And welcome back to the LSU Sports Insiders. Zach Ewing hanging out with Scott Rabelais and Wilson Alexander, previewing the Tigers and the Rebels at 2:30 this Saturday. Want to let you know that you can subscribe and get all of our LSU Insider videos on our YouTube page. That's the LSU Tigers at NOLA.com YouTube page. Also available, of course, audio only on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. But we encourage people to go to the YouTube page. You can get other videos. We've got Koki Riley explaining his always controversial top 25 vote and some shorts. We've
Koki's
got some
hot
other
takes.
stuff. Like, I listen to Koki, man, and sometimes I just shake my head. But he is, I got to give him credit. He's convicted.
He is. And as I said this after he took a lot of heat for one of his rankings a few weeks ago, he puts a lot of thought into it.
He really does.
You might not agree with the thought. Sometimes I do not myself. But he puts a lot of work into it, and you have to respect that.
What's the pick that you are talking about? I know which one you're talking about.
It was when he had
0-2 Notre Dame in the top 10.
Well, he's got,
Oh, no, I
he's
was
also got
talking
Florida
about-
State.
Florida State's like,
16th or
15
where is
or
he?
Yeah, he's got him way lower than everybody else. It's funny that I don't even know what you were disagreeing with him on, but Rab and I immediately thought of two different things. That's how that's how crazy Coach's ballot is.
But he researches it, and he, like you said, he has a faith of his convictions. So I have a lot of respect.
We
for that.
support Koki in that part.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look,
Don't want to talk about the guy. He's not even here to defend himself. People, what are you doing?
Well, what? Subscribe to the YouTube page. You can hear him
Okay.
defend
All right,
himself.
all right.
Okay, so,
That's right.
But the point is, he does his research. He's not just throwing rankings out there without doing that. So rest assured on that. Okay, let's break down LSU Ole Miss. We are going to start, as we do, when LSU has the ball. We talked about Caden Durham's injury. I think if you look at this Ole Miss defense, which is gettable, it is mostly gettable up front, Wilson. It is one of the bottom-ranked defenses in the country in running defense. It is one of the bottom-ranked defenses in the country in sacks. This O-line and this running game can possibly control this game, but we haven't seen that from the LSU side. So that's the interesting conundrum we have.
It is weakness versus weakness. As you said, Ole Miss has given up 190 yards per game on the ground. That ranks 122nd in the country. They only have 4 sacks this year?
I believe that's right, 4 sacks.
And they also they haven't blitzed a whole lot, but they haven't really just been getting pressure with 4 either. I think maybe in some ways, like Jake Retzlaff at Tulane, that's a guy who's running a lot. Taylor Green, that's a guy who's running a lot. And so maybe there's some things in the teams that they've played already that have affected that in some way. With Garrett Nussmeier being a different type of quarterback, perhaps Ole Miss sees this as a chance for that pressure to start to come. But we haven't seen LSU. There's no sign that we have that LSU can take advantage of this weakness. And maybe they'll go out and they'll do it because Clemson and Florida had salty defenses. I think much tougher than the one that LSU is going to play this weekend. But until they go out and they actually prove it, it's hard to put your faith in that they will. You're just sort of hoping that they will because of the weakness that Ole Miss has up front so far this year. And so I do think the offense is going to look better, but can it score enough against, if LSU's defense is getting scored on a little bit more in this game than it has yet this year? That's going to be the big question in this game and the thing to watch. And I don't know how I feel about it. Like if they actually are going to go out and do it and start scoring points and, really be explosive offensively. What they have to be able to do though is just keep themselves ahead of the chains. I have a stat here. ESPN had a great stat on this morning. Let me find it real quick. LSU's average third down distance this season has been 7.9 yards, which ranks 114th in the FBS. They've got to get into more manageable third down situations. You do not want to be in third and long on the road and asking Garrett Nussmeier to do everything. He looked a lot better last week against Southeastern, but you don't want to have him throwing the ball 40-plus times a game or something like that. We just got to see if LSU can do that against a team that you would think it should be able to run the ball on. And if it can't, then that is a really worrisome sign for the rest of the season in particular.
Rab, do you believe after watching him against Southeastern that Garrett Nussmeier is at 100%?
If he's not 100%, he's very close. I think closer than we saw. Like he threw the ball with accuracy. He made some deep throws, and he took off and ran for 26 yards, a career long, which I think was clearly put in there to make Ole Miss have to look at it on.
Well, that was just a scramble.
It was looking like a design play to me. Okay, well he took off and ran, and they're gonna look at it. I think they said at some point, Garrett, take off and run. At the very least, I think they said that. So he is something else for them to worry about. So I think he's in pretty good shape at this point. I wanted to see it. Kelly puts a positive spin on injuries sometimes. So I think it's like, okay, is he really better? He definitely looked better than he had to start the season, and certainly going back to preseason camp when like he's rolling the ball out there instead of throwing it in a scrimmage. Why is he doing that? So I think he's pretty good. And then like Wilson said, he doesn't need to carry the whole load. Maybe he's not that good just yet. They need to help him out, but I think he can make all the throws and make some runs if he has to, and give Ole Miss a lot of headaches for a defense that is got 190 yards per game rushing. That's
I think
really
Wilson
bad.
raises a good point though about Taylon Green and Jake Retzlaff. Nuss is not going to go run for 100 yards.
Well, no, certainly not.
And so I do wonder, and that to me makes Caden Durham and Jawan Johnson, whoever else is going to run the ball, that much more important in this game. You have to be getting 5 and not 2 on first down. You can't be going backward on first down. That's going to put you. Ole Miss is very much strikes me as like a bend but don't break defense, right? And LSU, I think, is fine with that. They're a little bit of a dink and dunk offense, but that's not going to work if you're 2nd and 12, 3rd and 9. Then it starts to become more difficult. And as we know, I think the other thing here is because of what we're about to talk about with the Ole Miss offense, LSU's offense has less margin for error than it's had at any point this year. They're going to have to put up some points. Unless this defense is just so good that it will stop one of the top offenses in the country, similar to how it has Florida and Clemson.
Yeah, it's I can't go into this game thinking LSU is not going to have to score at least in the 20s to win this game. It's a reasonable thing to expect. You're going on the road. You're playing a Lane Kiffin offense that no matter who he puts in at quarterback, he could put Wilson in at quarterback, and they're gonna get some points in yards.
I can spin it a little bit.
I know you played quarterback in high school.
He'll still up some open receivers for you.
I know
That would be nice.
There's pressure on them to perform, and something you said earlier about this is not their first road test. Say what you want about the Clemson game, but going into it. That was a difficult game that LSU could have won 27-10, and they played a good game. There were a couple of turnovers, yes, which they obviously always need to avoid when you're on the road. But they played a good solid game, and they made a few things happen in the running game at times, and did enough to with a very good defense to win the game. So I think it could be a similar recipe for LSU this time.
One thing on the Garrett Nussmeier front that I just wanted to sort of share my thoughts on it real quick. Against Louisiana Tech, and I think this is part of the result of this torso injury, he kept sailing the ball. And maybe he wasn't really able to rotate the way that you really need to. It seemed like he, especially as the game went along, wasn't doing that as much against Southeastern. Early in the game, they were still a little clunky, but then it really started to get pretty sharp. I liked that he hit a receiver deep downfield in the chest, and even though the pass wasn't completed to Nick Anderson in the end zone, that was a 50-yard throw down the seam. That was really nice to see, because when he was trying to make some of those deep throws against Louisiana Tech in particular, and I bring up that game because LSU was trying to throw deep at times and it wasn't working more so than it was even trying to against Florida. He was sailing it, or there was that really badly underthrown interception. The thing I'm interested to watch about with Nussmeier in this game is that Taylon Green had a lot of success throwing over the middle of the field against Ole Miss. I haven't been super impressed by Ole Miss's secondary either. We're going to see actually former LSU safety Sage Ryan in this game. That's going to be an interesting one to watch. Now, Ole Miss is only, their pass defense is a lot better than their run defense. But Garrett Nussmeier over the middle of the field this year, that's where he's been most effective. Is between the numbers. I mean, some of his PFF numbers here over the middle of the field, like you talk about 10 plus, he's 19 of 28 for almost 400 yards and 4 touchdowns with no picks over the middle of the field, over 10 yards. I think that I'm really interested to see if he can continue to attack that area, especially against Ole Miss in this game.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was going to mention the 20-plus air yards stats from PFF. I believe he was 4 of 13 those first 3 weeks. He was 2 of 3 against Southeastern, and the incompletion was the one you mentioned, where it probably should have been. He should have been 3 for 3, and so he was much better. Not that they're trying it a lot still, but he was better and more accurate on those throws. And so we'll see if that continues. One more quick thing: DJ Chester will not play in the first half of this game. What is the state of the LSU O-line in your eyes?
Shaky on the right side, in particular. I mean, Weston Davis struggled against Southeastern. He gave up 2 sacks. You got to tip your cap to Caleb Proctor, the Southeastern defensive lineman, who had 2 sacks, tackle for loss. Like he was kind of all over the place in that game. And they said on the broadcast that he was someone who had the opportunity to go and move up a level and get a lot of NIL money and chose not to do it.
He made himself some NFL money in that game, though.
Maybe so. But that's something that the kind of player LSU should expect to see every week in the SEC. And Weston Davis on those stunts really struggled, just sort of opening up his hips, not staying square. And so, but Brian Kelly said on Monday when he was asked about it, that he is their starter at right tackle. And that's the thing is, LSU really has no choice this week, because with Chester out for the first half, I was wondering if that would have complicated the decision. If Chester wasn't out for the first half, if LSU would have coming into this game maybe made a change, but you have no choice not to, at least for the first half. And so it's a little bit shaky, but also Ole Miss hasn't shown you necessarily anything that frightens you with this pass rush, as we talked about so far. But the offensive line has got to continue to play better, especially on that right side, and it's got to get a lot more push in the run game.
Like you said, talking about margin for error for LSU, Chester being out the first half decreases LSU's margin for error. He can play guard. We've seen him out at left tackle in the Clemson game. He certainly can play center. He played in Braylon Moore's place when he got hurt. He played all last year. So it's like it kind of makes you go, who can LSU depend on to go here if somebody gets hurt?
Yeah, Braylon Moore cannot be getting an ankle sprain on the first play,
right,
like he did against Louisiana Tech, because then you got to go down to a current walk-on in Braden Augustus, and I'm sure that he would try as hard as he can, but that's a tough spot to be thrown into.
Yeah, no doubt. It'll also be really interesting to see where they insert DJ into the lineup after halftime.
If they do it all, they might not.
Yeah, they may not, and it also may depend on game state and how things have been going. So that'll definitely be something to watch as the second half starts. Let's flip over now and talk about when Ole Miss has the ball. We mentioned this earlier. It appears, according to reports, that Trinidad Chambliss is going to be the starting quarterback. And Wilson, you mentioned this. This makes, statistically speaking, he has been much better. Transfer from Division II national champion Ferris State in Michigan, was going to go to Temple. And then at the last minute, Ole Miss said, we can pay more than Temple is for a starter. We need a backup. Come play in Oxford. And Trinidad Chambliss said, okay. And 2 weeks in, Austin Simmons gets hurt. Chambliss goes in. He has not turned the ball over. He has ran for, I think, 190-something yards in 2 games. He is a dual threat guy. He's passed for over 300 yards in both games. And by the way, that's against Arkansas and Tulane, who, depending on how you feel about Tulane versus Kentucky, are probably Ole Miss' 2 toughest tests thus far. So it's not like he's been feeding on weaker opponents. This guy can play.
Now, he has been feeding on slightly weaker defenses, perhaps. It's still a relatively small sample size, so one sort of game can really affect you statistically. But Kentucky is ranked 70th in the country in scoring defense, and Arkansas is 73rd. They're both allowing roughly 23 points per game. They are not the kind of defense that LSU has. So keep that in mind, and if LSU wins the game, then that's probably a huge reason why, is because Trinidad Chambliss has never faced guys as fast and dynamic as Whit Weeks and Harold Perkins, and he's got to deal with Mansour Delane in the secondary and all the other things that LSU does defensively under Blake Baker and all the havoc if he's able to create that. But he's been really, really good. He's been efficient with the football, especially against Arkansas. He completed 72% of his passes. He's running, like you said, and that's the thing is, DJ Lagway, people sometimes say dual threat, and I don't get it because he doesn't really run the football that much. But
you're
Klubnik,
right. You're right about him.
Never understood that. Cade Klubnik is known as a little bit more of a dual threat, and LSU handled that just fine. They're going to have to do that again in this game with Trinidad Chambliss.
He certainly was colorfully named quarterback. I think I can never remember.
All
LSU
name team
facing
for sure.
That's right. You got to like that. He is a problem with his feet. I think he's got a big problem with LSU. This is by far the best defense he's faced at Ole Miss, and certainly he didn't face anything like this on the Division II level. I don't care how far they went and who they played in the national championship playoffs on that level. The Wilson mentioned the speed, the depth that LSU has on defense, and then Blake Baker's defensive schemes. Wilson is writing about the defense this week for his game day story, and I don't want to go too much off on the deep end and take away from that. But he as you can say, it's the showing the blitz, then dropping guys in the coverage, and then bringing guys up and coming with blitzes with different angles. They confused Kate Klubnik, they confused DJ Lagway. DJ Lagway didn't know his helmet from his elbow by the end of that game. He was just throwing the ball and hoping it didn't find the other team's hands, and of course it did 5 times.
Our producer Robert's Florida grad. Sorry.
I'm glad,
Sorry, Robert.
I'm glad you came up with elbow as the body part.
Well, I was thinking of I was thinking of something else, and I switched. But I'm not saying you can't have success, because this defense, as good as they've been, every game they've had like some big bust. This a complete coverage bust, and
every game, surely.
Yeah,
but pretty yes, often enough where you should be a little worried about it. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Maybe not against Clemson. That's the one that I don't remember them. But
maybe
lately,
not.
yes.
But give them a couple of 4th down conversions. Anyway, had the one against Florida that was called back by a holding penalty. Again, sorry, Robert. But they're good for a big. I guess what I'm saying is I expect Chambliss and a Lane Kiffin offense are going to hit a couple of big plays, but I think it's going to be difficult for him to the point where no one's talking about this. It wouldn't totally shock me if they said, Austin, are you healthy enough? You need to go in there, because he's made a couple of mistakes and he's not seeing this defense the way we need him to.
Rab hits on a point that I was going to bring up, which is this defense is so aggressive, brings the blitzes so much, and especially this year has been really good in man coverage. That's Baker's MO. It's what he wants to be able to do most of the time. Last year they played LSU a lot more cover 2 than he said at one point he ever had in his life. This year they've been able to go back to playing a lot more man. They still vary things up obviously, but with that defensive style, if you can take advantage of that aggressiveness, then you can have a lot of success. And because you can leave yourself exposed in the back end by sending so much pressure. And I wonder if Lane Kiffin is the coach to be able to do that. To Rap's point, I've been wondering that, because we have seen these busts and seen some big plays at times. Like, is there going to be an offense that can do that consistently throughout a game? Schematically, Lane Kiffin has had a lot of success. Ole Miss is one of the most explosive offenses in the country. They are top 3 in plays over 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50 yards on the season. So that's going to be something to watch here, and something that gives me pause about maybe picking LSU in this game, because I still think LSU's defense is really good, and even against a team like Ole Miss can hold them down well under their season averages. But can they do it enough for an offense that has struggled to be able to keep up? The other person I want to mention real quick is Ole Miss running back. I apologize if I'm not pronouncing his first name correctly, but Kewan Lacey. He's got 358 yards rushing this season. He had 138 against Kentucky, and a lot of his yards have come after contact. 244 yards after contact, according to Pro Football Focus. LSU is going to have to be able to wrap him up and get him on the ground quickly so that he does not extend plays. The way that Ole Miss did 2 years ago in Oxford, LSU's defense doesn't have the same issues that it did at the time, but gosh, that tackling was really, really bad that game. And it just sort of suddenly came to mind as I said that. You can't have that happening again.
Yeah, I think back as you were talking, I mean, Blake Baker was the defensive coordinator at Missouri in 2023 when LSU went up there. And obviously they had Jaden Daniels. I'm not saying Trinidad Chambliss is Jaden Daniels. But what LSU had was a day where they had quite a few negative plays. Missouri had a good defense that year, and they got LSU a few times. But LSU also, as you said, caught them in aggressive situations and made some really big plays on their end. Now, again, they had Malik Neighbors. They had Brian Thomas. They had Jaden Daniels.
In their school history.
It's a slightly different situation. But I do think that is probably a good point, that we may see some big plays on both sides of the ball in this sort of strength versus strength matchup.
Maybe so. And that's also something that I'm sort of like wondering if we're going to start to see in this game, because I'm wondering if we're going to start to see it over the rest of the course of the season. LSU is going to start to play a lot better offenses that, when it goes up maybe against Texas A&M. Arkansas looks really good offensively, even though they can't close games and their defense hasn't been great. And then Oklahoma, when John Mateer is healthy, has been good offensively. Vanderbilt has been very good offensively. So like LSU is going to have to be able to not allow that to happen.
Yeah, or at least limit it, right? I mean, your offense, I think, is going to score enough points to cover a few mistakes, but you can't let Ole Miss get into the 30s and beyond, I think. Okay, we are going to move into our keys to the game. First, just a quick word. Again, we talk about you can lose a game or two and still get into the college football playoff, but this is shaping up to be an SEC title race shaping result on Saturday. We got Georgia, Alabama also, and in the Big Ten, you have Oregon and Penn State. Is a huge weekend in college football, and I think the winners of those two games, as well as this one, clearly are going to be favorites to not only make the college football playoff, but probably be pretty highly seeded. Rab.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, this is not a playoff hopes crushing defeat for either the Tigers or the Rebels in this one. Certainly, you got a long season to go, and a lot can happen. But it's important. LSU is going to have to go on the road and win at least two of these four road games. And I always feel like I got to set the Wayback Machine for these podcasts. But in 2006, LSU played 4 road games in the SEC, all against top 10 teams, and they split them. And they went 10-2, and it was a really good team. They went on and crushed Notre Dame in the Sugar Bowl, finished like 3rd in the country, setting up the national championship run a year later. This is like the toughest road set of games, at least it looks like right now, since 2006. All these teams that they're going to play on the road in the SEC. They're all games that LSU can win. There's no game LSU can't win with this team, but there's certainly all games that they could lose. And so you gotta break through and win at least a couple of these on the road against Ole Miss, Alabama, Vandy. It's difficult. And who's the fourth one? I'm blanking on. Oklahoma is the last one. They're ranked right now. We'll see what happens with John Mateer. When if he comes back from this broken hand, but it's a challenge right now. So but it's not the end of the season if they don't win this game for either team. But you don't want to get kind of be like behind. The loser of this game is definitely going to be a team that people are going from, like LSU. People are saying right now LSU's like the 5th seed or something like that. They might be out. A lot of the playoff projections. It's early. It's still September, but you want to win, but you don't have to give up hope if you don't.
I think it's just real quick. 2006, interesting comp, because that was the last time that LSU opened the season allowing 10 points or less in 4 straight games until this year.
Ah, that's right.
Interesting. Yeah, very, very interesting.
It was a really good team.
Gotcha. If you go 10-2 this year, you're going to be very happy. You're going to be in the college football playoff.
That's right. And I think to your point, Rab, ESPN does this FPI playoff predictor. Usually see it in November, where if this team wins this game, they're this percent to make the playoff. If they lose, they're this percent.
No.
It's only September. We're not quite at that stage, but I do think that there's probably a decent gap. If you win the game, you're over 50%, and if you lose, you may be under 50%. So, I don't know what the gap is exactly, but it does shape up to be a big game, because the winner is going to set itself up to be in really good shape going into the second half of the season. So, let's talk about keys to the game. Wilson, why don't you get us started? What is your key to LSU Ole Miss?
Oh gosh, I mean, I touched on a lot of them already. If I had to sort of really choose one thing that I think will determine it, it's probably, the offense has got to be able to score points. So, because in my head, I'm just thinking like, oh, well, if LSU can limit explosive plays, I feel like LSU is going to be able to do that defensively. The offense has got to be able to keep up. In order to do that, they got to be able to establish the run. You got to be able to take advantage of this Ole Miss front that looks susceptible, that is 120th in the country. LSU does not need to go and run for 190 yards a game like these other teams have on Ole Miss, but it needs to probably run for 150. It needs to be able to pick up short yardage situations and convert on 3rd and 2 to keep drives alive. That's something that's been a big focus for this team over the past few weeks. We've seen them go under center to do that a few times. I imagine we'll probably continue to see that a little bit. That's what I think is probably the key for me, is be able to maintain possession and run the football when needed. I think Garrett Nussbaum is probably going to be asked to do a good bit. They're going to throw the ball a lot. but you got to be able to take advantage of this run defense at Ole Miss in order to put him in better situations and keep your offense on the field.
A big plus for LSU with the running game in the short yard situations is having Trez Green back. LSU likes to go with the they call the jumbo, the heavy package, whatever. When you bring in extra tight ends,
12 personnel. Yeah, they often will go 12 personnel with 2 offset tight ends, bringing the receivers close, and then they use a single back. We've seen that a good bit.
I'm not saying he's an all-pro blocker.
Yeah, it's interesting to bring him up because it's not his strength.
No, it's not. He's more of a large receiver actually, but it helps. It helps to have that extra person. That's a great key to the game because Ole Miss is allowing
him in the red zone. Ooh, yeah.
Right. 5 yards per game rushing. 5 yards per carry is what Ole Miss is allowing. 5 yards per game would be really good. 5 yards per carry is what Ole Miss is allowing on the season. LSU's got to they've got to be better. They got to be more effective in that area. Last week, Chambliss did not turn the ball over against Tulane. That was a game I expected to be close. Zach, I don't know what you thought, but I didn't think it was going to be 45-10 or whatever it ended up being. I thought Tulane would give them a game, and I don't think he was sacked. He certainly didn't turn the ball over. Chambliss. LSU's going to give up a couple of plays. It's a Lane Kiffin offense. Like I said, he's made a lot of quarterbacks look really good over the years, and maybe better than their abilities. So you got to counter that with some negative plays. They got to get to him. They got to sack him. They got to turn him over. So I think that's a key to the game. LSU's defense creating more negative plays than they give up explosive plays. I think if they can do that, I think they will win the game.
Wilson, you actually mentioned my key to the game. That's the red zone. I think Ole Miss is a bend but don't break defense. LSU's happy to move the ball down the field, kind of patiently, but they got to turn those into 7s and not 3s. Mm-hmm. And on the other side, if Ole Miss gets in the red zone, this is where Kiffin's good at scheming stuff up, but also where you have, maybe a quarterback not experienced at this level where the field shrinks and LSU's defense can really change this game around by getting a turnover in the red zone or forcing some field goal tries. So I think that's a big one when these teams get in the red zone, who's getting 7s. All right, prediction time. LSU versus Ole Miss. You can leave your picks in the comments below on the YouTube section. Curious to see who gets more here. We got a tight spread. We got Ole Miss by 1.5. Koki and Reed are our other 2 regular LSU insiders. They are not here, but we do have their predictions. We got a split. Reed's got 28-24 LSU. Koki's got 24-17 Ole Miss in a lower scoring game. So we have a split, so we got to break this tie. There's 3 of us. We'll break it one way or the other. Scott Rabelais, what you got?
Look, LSU, it's going to be bonkers at Vaught Hemingway Stadium on Saturday. It's a smaller stadium, but it's going to be a great atmosphere. And it's like I said, it's a Lane Kiffin offense. You have to expect that they're going to get some points. However, on balance, whoever plays quarterback for Ole Miss, LSU has the better quarterback. They certainly have the better defense, and they're going to have to prove themselves on the ground. I think it's a close game. Certainly can go either way. I'm picking a slightly weird score: LSU 26-22.
All right.
How do you get to that?
I don't know.
Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin goes for 2 on his first touchdown because he just is something that he might do.
But,
yeah.
I would really love it if that's what ends up happening. And we're like, Rab, how did you know?
I'll remind people, in all my years of covering LSU football since 1992, I've gotten the score right one time.
Well,
exactly right.
This would be a hell of one to get right at 26-22. So, Wilson?
My gut all week has been that Ole Miss was going to win this game. The metrics all point to Ole Miss in a lot of ways. And then last night I started, maybe it's because I was writing about the defense, I started thinking like, well, am I sure about that? But again, I think that LSU is going to keep Ole Miss well under its season averages, but I'm not convinced by the offense just yet. I've got Ole Miss 24-21. I don't feel great about the score, but with Ole itself, exactly how we're going to get there. But with Ole Miss at home, I am going to take the home team in this game.
All right. So it's up to me to break this tie. And by the way, I meant to mention that. Go read Wilson's story about Blake Baker and how he has implemented this defense, as well as like influx of really talented players. But it is a good read, and you should check it out, theadvocate.com/LSU for all of our coverage. I have 30-27 Ole Miss. Same spread as you. Nobody else went over. The point total is 54.5. So I like to be the outsider. So I'll go over and say 30-27. Like, I do think LSU's defense is very good, and I think that they will hold Ole Miss below averages in all categories. But having said that, if Ole Miss running quarterbacks, I talked about the red zone, they can be devastating in the red zone because if you let them loose, they can hurt you. They're just that extra man to account for. And then on the other side of the ball, we've talked about it all season, LSU's running game. We talked about it all of last season. If they can't establish the running game, you're putting too much on Garrett Nussmeier's shoulders. I'm still not convinced that he's at 100%. And I think Ole Miss just makes one more play, just as LSU did in Tiger Stadium last year.
All right. See how it plays out.
That's what we have. We have 3 Ole Miss picks, 2 LSU picks. Leave your picks in the comments below, and we will join you for a post-game show Saturday evening. Hopefully these guys can join us from Vaught Hemingway, but otherwise I know Reed Darcy and myself will also be taking your comments, your questions, and going through that one with you on these same YouTube channels. So for our producer, Robert Young, he's Scott Rabelais, he's Wilson Alexander, I'm Zach Ewing. Thanks for watching.